Imagine this scenario. The lights are out in every typical American home, every business, every government building, every hospital. There are no cars on the road, no phones working, no radio, and no internet service. Looking around outside, everything appears normal. But high above, very high above, a single nuclear warhead affixed to an intercontinental ballistic missile just detonated at 300 miles above the center of the United States of America. In the blink of an eye, history was made, forward progress was stopped, and every American was transported back to what life was like in the 1800s.
What Mr. Wicked Prepared was just describing is an EMP, or electromagnetic pulse, and while it sounds like something from a movie, this threat is far from fictional. We've had quite a few subscribers reach out to us and ask us how we prepare for EMP scenarios. So we put this video together with you all in mind. As with any situation we prepare for, over the years Rob has researched this topic religiously. So, Mr. Wicked Prepared, what can we expect if, or more accurately when, we're struck by an EMP?
Well, Jara, the short answer is nobody fully knows. But worst case, immediately following an EMP, we're talking no electronics, no wires, no battery-powered devices, no circuit boards, no computer chips, no power grid. All technology damaged beyond repair. Only electrical items hardened to withstand EMPs or locked inside Faraday cages could survive the attack. We'll go over protection later on in this video, but first I want to describe what an electromagnetic pulse is before I explain how to survive one. Before we go any further, you need to know there is a lot of uncertainty regarding what an EMP would and wouldn't affect, and also many variables including the altitude of detonation, the size of the explosion, and whether it was caused by a nuclear or non-nuclear bomb, and whether it was a single bomb or several. Most of the research done about EMPs is done with small-scale testing and simulations because, well, a full-size test of an EMP would be quite damaging. In fact, in 1962, the U.S. military conducted an EMP test, not fully knowing what to expect, detonating a 1.4 megaton nuclear warhead 248 miles above Johnson Atoll in the Pacific Ocean. Although the blast was nearly 1,000 miles away, it knocked out streetlights, phone communications, caused power outages, and damaged other electrical systems in Hawaii, as well as causing damage in California and Alaska, and destroying 6 satellites that were orbiting overhead. And that bomb was again 1.4 megatons. Now imagine the use of the Russian-developed 57 megaton bomb, tested in 1961, over 1,500 times more explosive than the U.S. bombs that hit Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. An explosion that size, high above the United States, would leave the North American continent completely in the dark, with irreversible damage to every power grid, every copper wire, and every circuit board.
So without getting too scientific on us, what happens exactly when an EMP is created?
When a bomb is detonated high in the atmosphere, the resulting electromagnetic pulse is broken down into 3 different waves of impact, all occurring nearly simultaneously, yet behaving in very different ways. The first wave, known as E1, occurs in just 5 nanoseconds after the explosion. The E1 shockwave is caused by gamma rays created by the nuclear explosion. This wave ionizes the atmosphere, allowing any long, conductive, antenna-like object to pick up the electricity. The long, heavy wires of our power grid and telecommunications grid are the #1 target of this wave, quickly being put in an overvoltage situation. The event occurs so quickly that conventional surge protectors and lightning protection devices simply cannot react fast enough to prevent damage. The second wave, E2, is a burst of energy very similar to that of lightning. It can certainly lead to further damage of the grid, electronics, and vehicles, but unlike E1, most lightning protection devices will work against the E2 wave. But these devices will only be effective if they weren't destroyed by the E1 wave. The third and final wave, predictably called E3, is a product of the fireball from the explosion. The expanding and collapsing of the fireball forces Earth's magnetic field to oscillate, which generates and inserts electricity into any conductive material below. Again, the power transmission lines, as well as phone lines, would be damaged, if not already destroyed. But this electricity generated by the magnetic field would also find its way into anything with a circuit. So this could include your house wiring, computers, vehicles, generators, etc. Like with the E1 wave, lightning arresters are ineffective against E3. It's worth noting here that as much as we have to worry about this attack coming from an enemy of our nation, we also need to be aware that a similar type of event can be caused by our own sun. I've seen and heard a lot recently about expecting an attack on our grid, and in one of my last videos, I talked about what I think our most likely threat will be. I'll put a link to that video in the upper right corner here if you're interested in hearing my thoughts for the future. If you do click away, just be sure to return to this video so you can find out how to protect yourself and your belongings from this imminent threat. Also, stick around for later in this video when I tell you how close the world got to an EMP attack. But even though, in my opinion, I can see the United States or any NATO country being attacked by an EMP created by an adversary, there's also the strong possibility of this type of event happening naturally. And in fact, it already has happened before.
This was called the Carrington event, right?
Yes, ma'am. On September 1st, 1859, the largest geomagnetic storm on record struck the Earth in what is now known as the Carrington event. This storm was the result of a coronal mass ejection, or CME, traveling from the sun to our planet in just under 18 hours. A CME is essentially a bubble of superheated plasma that erupts from the sun and shoots through space. Remember, this was 1859, a day when telegraph wires connected cities, but electricity had not yet been harnessed to improve or complicate our daily lives. Upon impact, the geomagnetic storm shut down every telegraph line around the world, causing the system to go dark and the world to become disconnected. Telegraph operators reported sparks coming from their machines and even starting fires in their offices. Auroras from the magnetic field filled the skies with so much light, people got up to start their day's work in the middle of the night, unaware the new day hadn't yet started. Researchers that have studied the event say that if this large of a geomagnetic storm were to happen today, it would destroy every power grid on the globe, leaving the entire Earth dark. Estimates have been made that it would take between 4 and 10 years before power could be restored, but that's assuming enough people survive that long to do the work. Realistically speaking, after a storm that size, electricity may never be restored. The event in 1859 is certainly the biggest on record, but it's not the only time it has happened. Researchers have found evidence in carbon dating of an even larger event happening as far back as the year 900 AD. More recently, there were geomagnetic storms in 1882 and 1921, both disrupting telegraph service and sparking multiple fires, and again in 1960 with global disruption of radio service. A storm in 1972 upset communications on Earth, as well as with multiple satellites, permanently disabling at least one. In March of 1989, a storm hit Earth and crippled the Hydro-Quebec power grid, leaving over 6 million people in Canada and the US without power. Smaller events occurred in 2000 and 2003, producing disruptions with communications, electricity, and satellites. And even over the last few months, solar flare activity has steadily increased, putting us in an unfortunate trend. The moral of the story is that these threats, be it an EMP created by man or a CME from nature, are real, and the probability of either of them happening is great. Our world seems to be in a constant state of chaos lately. Would it really surprise any of us if a nation chose to strike with such a weapon? It would be a very powerful tool to use, and the after effects would last years. But could Mother Nature strike first? Absolutely. She's a very unpredictable force. Switching back to EMPs for a second, at the time of making this video, an EMP attack had yet to be used in combat. However, it came close, and it was actually the United States with its finger on the trigger. In 1991, U.S. General Norman Schwarzkopf asked President George H.W. Bush for authorization to detonate a nuclear warhead above the Middle East, with intentions of crippling the country of Iraq. The president ultimately did not give permission, but the threat, and the weapons, certainly exist to accomplish such a task.
With all this being said, what are we doing to protect against this, and what can our viewers do?
Well, just as there are varying opinions on the effects of an EMP or CME, there are also a wide range of thoughts on how to protect against them. Variables such as how large the event is and where its center is located make a huge difference on what could be damaged and how to prevent that damage. But from my research, and the research of others, I've found two solutions that are the easiest, most cost-effective, and most successfully tested methods for civilians to protect their property. Keep in mind, most all electronic equipment operated by the U.S. military is built to be hardened against EMPs. However, there is evidence that shows even this equipment may not be hardened enough to protect against the size of modern-day weapons capable of creating an EMP. But for those of us in our homes, here are the two solutions we have. First up, the Faraday cage. Have you heard the term before? In its most basic form, a Faraday cage is an enclosure made of conductive material which ends up blocking most or all electromagnetic radiation from entering and affecting what is inside. When exposed to an electromagnetic charge, the electricity will remain in the conductive material without damaging what is inside, as long as the items inside are insulated from the enclosure. I'll put some links down below in the description to show you what I'm talking about. I'll also be doing a video very soon about how I built the cage we're using, so that you can make one yourself. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. And method number 2 I found for EMP protection, the EMP shield. The best way to think about this is it's like a surge protector for your entire home or vehicle, but it works to prevent the fast, massive surge from an EMP much, much faster than a conventional surge strip. And yes, I said your home or your vehicle. EMP Shield has units to protect your home, vehicle, RV, generator, wind and solar systems, even your radios. Now, as I've been saying throughout this whole video, there's a lot of speculation as to what an EMP would or wouldn't damage, but as the old adage goes, I'd rather be safe than sorry. And there's arguments out there about the need for protecting your home or your vehicle. Skeptics, including myself at first, wonder that if every electronic device will be damaged beyond repair, what point is there to try to prevent damage to the wiring in your home? What sold me? The thought of every wire in our home getting a jolt of electricity so large it can't handle it, overheats, and begins burning within the floors and walls. What good is it to prepare and stock up for years just to lose it all in an EMP-created house fire? That would be absolutely devastating, but completely avoidable with an EMP shield wired in. Whether it's voltage coming into your home from the grid, or voltage built up within the circuits in your home's wiring, the EMP shield will pull away any overvoltage within 500 trillionths of a second. That's fast. And similarly with your vehicle, what's the point in trying to preserve your car? It's not like you'd be able to just pull into a gas station. You'd be left with a car that runs, but only with what gas you've got left in the tank. But what's to say you'll be home when the grid goes down and everyone's vehicles die? Or what if your kids are at school or your spouse is at work? Having a functioning vehicle, if only until the tank runs dry, could become priceless when trying to gather your family members to ready for what is coming next. It's certainly something to think about and take seriously. After an event like this, our lives would be turned completely upside down. But I guess the biggest point I want to make in this video is that this isn't science fiction. This isn't just a Hollywood storyline. This is a real threat that exists and could happen at any moment. With that being said, it's certainly survivable, but without knowledge, preparations, and supplies, many sadly would perish over the long term. Don't let it be you. Do what you can now to prepare yourself and your loved ones before it's too late.
It's like they say, there is no downside to being prepared, and certainly a lot of benefits in being wicked prepared. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow.